All right. Sweet. So welcome everyone to our Ask Me Anything with Dr. Catherine. And for those who haven't met you before, Dr. Catherine, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a wait, Calvin, are you still looking for how to? Okay.
Oh, how do you use
Uh,
Avatar? I'll tell you. Um, okay, so are you on your computer or phone? Laptop. Perfect. Okay. So bottom left-hand corner, do you see where it says audio as well as video? Yeah, you can speak. Absolutely.
Hi, Brittany. I watch your Instagram videos all the time, and I relate so heavily to you, especially when you were talking about narcissism and stuff like that. So I'm really, really glad to actually be here. Thank you, Katura, for letting me know early on because I honestly forgot.
oh,
So I'm so
thank you,
glad.
Katura.
Okay, how do I do this again?
Oh, so for the avatar, I'm so glad you're here, by the way, Calvin. Thank you for saying that as
Thank you. Thank you.
well. Okay, so bottom left-hand corner, do you see where it says video?
Yeah, I think I see it. Okay. Uh,
And
See
there's
that little uppy arrow on the right of it? Sorry, go ahead, Brittany.
oh
there
no,
we go.
Elizabeth.
yeah,
Yay!
Does this
Yay!
work? Does this
Your
work?
puppy.
yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we're good.
Okay. I wish I
Excellent.
could make it a Shih Tzu because I had a Shih Tzu when I was a few years ago. Okay, sorry. I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, please.
That's okay. And by the way, this isn't Ask Me Anything. So if anyone has questions along the way, feel free to write them in the chat box or raise your hand and then we can, have you ask. Have you ask?
Thank you.
You know what I mean? I hope. Fabulous. Okay, so you're welcome,
Yay! Yay!
Dr.
Okay,
Catherine.
so let's see. So I am a licensed psychologist and a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am an ADHDer. I found out I had ADHD in about 2000, and then, like many others, I'm kind of on that self-diagnosis path of decades. My special interest is clearly psychology and people and relationships, and so it's cool to be able to study all the things and get degrees and licenses in my special interests. And so I'm here to share and chat and explore. And so today the topic is Brittany. I'm going to let you, Brittney-Elizabeth. Sorry, I don't want to
That's
shorten your
okay.
name.
Um,
Brittany-Elizabeth, I'm going to let you go ahead and talk about the topic really quickly again.
Excellent. Okay, so our topic today is why do we attract narcissists and can we please stop? And I want to talk a little bit about, it seems to be a universal experience that we've had abusive relationships or been with people who have narcissistic tendencies. And so I want to talk about that and some strategies to avoid it. But I'm also hoping that we can talk about ways that we can create capacity within ourselves for healthier relationships, because I'm learning that that too is what the heck? Oh, sorry, I just heard a weird noise. That too is a skill that needs to be developed. It's not like you just go from like the toxic things to boom, everything is happy. There are some skills that need some developing too. So I want to talk about those things today. And I've written a few questions
Okay.
for you if you don't mind. Let's start there.
Yeah, and I see there's one in the chat right when I logged in.
Oh,
I don't know if you saw that one. It's about why do we see narcissists as angels and innocent and have huge understanding for them regarding their hard life background. I don't know if you got that one or not, but
no.
it looks like I got one.
Yeah, okay, let me go up and see. Where did that go?
It was at 206, and the person has a hyphen for a name right now.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Why do we see narcissists as angels and innocent and have huge understanding for them regarding their hard life and background?
Mhm. Okay, I mean, I would love to answer that one, but I feel like we could start with some more basics first. I don't know. Do you have more basic questions? But let's bookmark that because I love that question.
Let me
Seriously, and I
see.
have big answers.
I think all of mine kind of go in kind of deep too, but I'll start with this one. Many of us have been taught to override our instincts because, we were raised around so many neurotypical people who didn't understand that our needs were different. So, how can we begin to recognize and honor our instincts and hear our no more clearly?
Mhm. That's such a big one. Yeah, I think. if we wanted to talk about what narcissism is, and I guess maybe for the context of this, let's just talk about it. First thing I want everyone to understand is that we're not diagnosing anybody. We're not saying anyone has a personality disorder. But my favorite way of understanding narcissism and narcissistic tendencies is as a defense mechanism, a set of defense mechanisms, and they're usually kind of like developmental. It's usually an issue of people who sometimes they used to call things that would fall along the lines of narcissistic defenses would be sort of arrested development. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but a lot of the narcissistic worldview and approaches are kind of age appropriate to a younger age, sort of regressed. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make sure we had that caveat that we're talking about kind of like maybe toxic, maybe immature, not necessarily somebody who's fully, traumatizing narcissist. But that said, what happens around a narcissistic culture, narcissistic families, or within a narcissistic individual is that there tends to be an insecurity that causes people to want more control of others. So it's like, I want you to behave a certain way. And then when we're raised in an environment with people like that, then we do learn to suppress our no, the things that we want or don't want. We learn to put ourselves last, so to speak, as a way of trying to keep ourselves safe around that person. And so what that leads to is fear of having our own needs, fear of having our own voice, because many of us have run into it where it's like, if we try to say no, then that makes life harder. If we try to say, I would like X, Y, or Z. And if it doesn't match the worldview of, for example, maybe a narcissistic oriented parent, then they would be like, no, you're my child and I need you to be just like me. And so what we have to do is suppress and disconnect from a lot of feelings that would otherwise be our guide. So the answer to the question, how do we get that back, is we have to figure out how to find our feelings and whatever way we can best connect to them. And I think in general, it's been spoken a lot about people who are neurodivergent tend to be bottom-up thinkers, and we're also bottom-up processors, which is ironic because when we learn to sort of take a hike and not have a body or try not to, not have feelings, anytime we as a child, we might have disconnected from our feelings, it's a little bit like dissociation. It's a little bit like kind of trying to leave escape this 3D meat space experience. Right. And so that means that we're not able to connect to our feelings and we don't feel safe connecting to them and we don't feel safe in our body. So how we can start to be relearn how to have needs and express them and assert them is, I think the best way is to start getting in touch with what's going on in your body. And the way that happens is a lot about like the nervous system, starting to notice nervous system responses. Because, for example, let's say like right now I'm kind of nervous and I'm like, oh, am I fumbling my words? Maybe I'm like not in touch with my body. But what I can do is I can feel my feet on the floor. To do that, I can notice, oh yeah, there's a sensation in my stomach, very familiar. As I start to pay attention to those things, I can notice what my nervous system is doing. And then what happens is we start to understand we have a choice about how to respond to our nervous system versus just automatically just piecing out every time something sucks, which is a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You are doing an amazing job answering these questions, by the way. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
But thank you for being honest about being nervous, because I feel nervous too, and I feel it in my temples. There's like a pulsing pressure. So yeah, it is about clearing what you feel in your body. I love that. And for those who are new to Soft, there is a section in the Mind Quest tab called the Sanctuary. It's like one of the first sections you'll see. And it's full of all of these practices that you can use to help you with various needs. But the very first one, labeled number 1, because it's the most important, is face your emotions. And it's just for this, so that you can learn to get quiet and drop into your body and start learning to like illustrate what you're feeling around your body. And it encourages you to get creative. Like if it had a color, what color would it be? If it had a shape, what shape would it be? Yeah,
Mhm.
it helps you to build a lot of self-trust. I think that can lead to learning to trust your instincts when it comes to relationship building too. So yeah, just wanted to toss that in.
So good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's such an important thing, like learning what our nervous system is holding, the little micro traumas and things like that. Our imagination is a big part of it. Sort of freely just taking the time to comment for ourselves what it is, what's the sensation like, where is it living in my body? And yeah, so
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm
it's a
just
really great resource.
for sure. And also Dr. Catherine, for those who are new here, if you look in the MindQuest tab, she has a section that's all about her, and you can book her for a one-on-one if you want more intensive coaching. That is available too, if you're ready to dive in deep. So I'm going into the side here where Calvin says, I saw a video of an autistic person who started a feeling journal, a diary, where when things bother them or boundaries get crossed, he writes them down, so it's not overlooked, and he can bring it up at a later date when he can have a private conversation with the person who may be the cause and stand up for themselves. That's elite.
Smart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. And then
Mm-hmm.
as I listen
Just
to,
don't let the narcissist find your diary and use it against you.
oh my gosh, can we talk about that?
Yeah, so
That's a whole other frustrating thing that happens when you're dealing with someone who has narcissistic qualities or is just emotionally abusive, and you bring things to their attention and somehow you end up talking about how you brought it to their attention instead of the issue at hand. What is a good way to make it through that situation? What do you do next?
ooh. Well, I love the idea of writing down the situation and maybe saving it for a time when you can come and approach it calmly, because one okay, so there's this whole um it's kind of like anecdotal colloquial body of information about things narcissists do, and there's all these great labels for them. People like Dr. Ramani on YouTube can kind of give you the rundown. And there's a thing that narcissistic people will do, and this has been labeled narcissistic supply, seeking narcissistic supply, and that can be anything from just getting praise to getting negative attention, similar to like a regressed child might do, right? And so they might do things to try to get a rise out of us because there's a feeling of like toying with us, playing in our face, right? So I think part of it is just not taking the bait. So one strategy that comes out when you encounter a narcissist that's trying to get narcissistic supply, is a technique would be to go gray rock in that moment, meaning there's nothing to see here. So like concrete, like, okay, thanks for sharing. We'll get back to you in another time on that. Something where we would not take the bait, not let them get a rise out of us. And then the journaling is yeah, it's epic, because you could then go and think about the conversation, which we do so much, especially neurodivergent people, in the shower, whatnot. I should have said, I could have said, I wish I would have. If we can strategize it and come up with, what was it that bothered me in that conversation, and really think it through. There's that other resource we have, the conflict resolution formula journal page, right? So it's like, look that up, because thinking through what happened, how I felt when it happened, and then this one is the stories that played in my head when that happened, and then what I would like instead is where it ultimately comes up to. So we want to just be able to ultimately say, hey, when this happened, it made me feel some type of way that was not okay. And then saying, here's what I would like instead. When we can be very clear about what we want, they may say no, but at least then we can be like, okay, good. Then I'm going to withdraw my energy from the situation, or I'm not going to speak to you until we can speak calmly. Things like that. It's a little bit like we're reparenting our reactive self so that we can not take the bait and not be reactive externally.
That's
Especially because, it seems like that's what they want.
100% want to get a rise out of you for sure. Any type of attention, it seems, is good attention. Um, okay, can I give you my anecdotal answer to this?
Yes,
Okay, this is a
always.
non-professional, possibly toxic answer. And it is that when I deal with people who like if I bring something to their attention and they throw it back at me, that's the end of the connection. That's usually the end. Like I try to give it a few days just to see if they're going to be able to like come down and apologize and we can talk about it more rationally. And I might even approach them one more time with it. But if they like double down on that, I can't hear you, then I won't say it's the end of the connection, but that's when I reestablish the connection. And I like to use this thing called it's like I am a planet. Each of us is a planet, and we have these orbital rings around us. And sometimes it's just about moving people to a different ring because if they're in that first orbit, they're close enough to touch me and they're abusing that privilege. So maybe I need to move them to orbit 2 or 3 or even to outer space, which means now they're totally out of my life. But yeah, I found that that was the biggest contributor to my lack of self-confidence and self-worth is like letting people remain in my first orbit when they couldn't even hear me. And I just felt totally unseen and unheard. So again, this is my anecdotal, unprofessional advice is that I be letting people go. Yeah.
I mean, I have heard that sort of like the inner circle and then outer circles. And like that's really helpful because I think for us, it's sort of like, well, golden rule, I treat people the way I want to be treated. And therefore, I'm expecting everyone else is following that same rule. And then the next thing you know, I'm info dumping something really personal because I feel unfortunately, I did not check closely enough and I feel safe and I wasn't. And then the next thing you know, the person that I talked to uses it against you. So like in that colloquial narcissist world, they say they recruited flying monkeys, they started a smear campaign, you know. So yeah, I think that's not the worst advice at all. And
Yeah.
learning, you know, sometimes overcorrection is going to happen. We might be a little bit, you know, after being way too open, we might be like a little bit, you know, we may overcorrect and be quick to, you know, say goodbye to people at first. And then at some point, we'll be able to learn how to tolerate appropriately
Yeah.
different people and setting boundaries and, you know, not necessarily cutting them off, but it's okay. We can be cool. This is the thing about being in a community, which is hard, is that not everyone's going to agree. So it's like, it's easy to be like, no, you like the Who and I don't like the Who, so get away from me. You know, like, okay, I can tolerate people that even like country music. No.
For real?
Okay, sorry, that was a weird analogy. Yeah,
Okay.
there's some, yeah.
There's a couple of comments, and I believe Calvin wanted to share an example with us, but there was one before that. Give me 1 second. Okay, so Quentin asks, "Is there any can we talk about narcissistic symptoms?" Says, "Is there any relevant research, or will we talk about at all narcissistic symptoms? Systems, sorry, narcissistic systems."
Okay, so narcissistic systems or narcissistic symptoms?
Symptoms.
Systems. Yeah, okay. So that's a great question. Here's the thing about narcissistic systems or narcissisystems, as I like to call them. Okay, we have it's kind of like extrapolating, just like we could have a friend, you know, at school or a parent who is kind of narcissistic. They look one of their defensive strategies is to try and manage um, their anxiety and their feelings by looking outward and projecting, and then also by blaming other people and controlling what's going on. So, just like you can have that in a one-on-one relationship, you can also have it in a family or in a school or a work environment. Speaking of those circles, right? Or a government or a capitalistic colonial system. Like, okay, so I mean, really, a relationship with the toxic narcissist is a little bit like being in a one-person cult. And when a really toxic narcissist creates a whole group of people and is abusing them, that's it's narcissism. It's just that it's even more maybe grandiose, or it's just sort of yeah, it's like manipulation on a higher order of more people. So, if you wanted to like look at the patterns that narcissistic systems tend to follow, you can look up some of the literature and writing about like how alcoholic families are, because alcoholism or drug addiction kind of is parallel to narcissism. I think that using substances sort of narcissist makes a person kind of behave in narcissistic ways. And so if you look up like the family that has like the golden child and the scapegoat and the lost child and like those roles in relationships, that kind of describes a little bit about sometimes it's like the narcissist at the center of a wheel trying to keep other people separate so that they can always have control of the others. um yeah, but scapegoat, golden child, that's one of the things that you're going to notice when somebody would be, for example, favoring somebody over somebody else. Um, in the literature for psychoanalytic way of understanding narcissistic defenses, they're described as a pattern of primitive idealization and devaluation. So there's that idea of the golden child and the scapegoat, or you're so great, I love you so much, and now you have wronged, you've disappointed me, and it's over. Or love bombing at the start, and then starting to do future faking, like holding the carrot and the stick as a way of keeping a source of supply. So these are all like things to watch for in the narcissists.
Systems. I love it. Thank you for
Mhm.
sharing that. Calvin, are you here? All the boxes just jumbled around and now I don't see you anymore. Oh, there you are. I found you. Okay, so Calvin's got his hand up. And please also let me know if these are your pronouns. And yes, feel free to unmute and let us know what you're thinking. And I'm gonna mute to give you the floor.
Thank you, Brittany. I very much connected to with Catherine was saying about narcissists, especially about the carrot and the stick approach, because that's currently what I'm dealing with. So I'm reading a comment that I actually posted on Brittany's video when she was first kind of bringing this up. So it reads, so, and it literally is meant to read like that. So, like there's like many, many O's. So, Miss Brittney-Elizabeth, first I want to say I just joined the Soft app about a week or two ago, and I've mainly been present in the Zoom calls because I absolutely love talking to my other fellow supportive neurodivergents there. And I want to thank you for even building such a space where that is possible. So that's just my personal thank you. Second, is I'm literally dealing with a similar situation at the moment. My current manager at one of my jobs, I didn't want to, put him on blast out there. But yeah, my current manager at one of my jobs is what I believe to be a narcissistic perfectionist. And his methods in bringing out the results he requires create a hostile work environment for me. And since I too have a strong sense of justice and teamwork, I've tried multiple occasions to bring up the faulty in his strategies and how non-reliable they are. However, it provides unnecessary stress, how it provides unnecessary stress for an environment that is more attuned to creating a space for fun, safety, and where the audience slash clients are more laid back than his previous experiences have made him believe. No matter what verbal strategies I approach with to somehow create an alternative strategy that uses my strengths in better ways, it feels as if I'm talking to a brick wall that I can't stop from falling on top of me mentally. I'd love to go more into detail for the next Zoom event you have, so I can find out how I can move forward. I'm glad I'm not alone in this particular struggle when it comes to dealing with neurotypicals. So, to break down just a few barriers, I am currently a dancer for bar mitzvahs. And one of my managers there He is pretty much the most booked. He's very, very professional. He's very, very good at what he does. However, certain strategies that he um, goes with in order to, I guess, make it a grandiose big party. He is the MC. He's the person that hosts and, makes the people move. He's not the DJ. That's someone different. He brings the kids and the adults close for different phases of the bar mitzvah, whether it's the blessing and the hora, whatever the case may be. If you have any questions, I can answer them in the chat. Um, but what he does specifically with me as a dancer slash a hype man, he gets very uh I guess, aggressive in a way. And he knows he is. And one thing that most, I feel, narcissists really don't be is aware that they're a narcissist. This guy knows he's a narcissist. He also knows that he's a perfectionist and he's willing to do pretty much anything and everything he can in order to make his vision, not exactly the client's, vision or even the child's, their birthday, not their exactly vision come true, his vision for the bar mitzvah come true. You see what I'm saying? So, we have these conversations before about, well, maybe letting people take a break. They don't have to be dancing all the time. Or speaking the way that he does to whether it's the DJ, whether it's me or the other dancer, expecting the unobtainable for us, which is basically making people who are either tired or too old, to get out of their seat and get on the dance floors. Like you want everybody huddled in some sort of fashion, and not everybody can do that. That's not really attuning to the sensitivities and even the concerns of people who probably don't really like to even party that much. You know what I mean? They are more chill, they're more relaxed, and they are still having fun just in their own way. It's meant to be a party. A party is very laid back and chill. You see what I'm saying? So not everything has to have everybody's participation except the actual phases in which we're honoring the family. And I'm not going to go too far into this, but the last shift that I had, he was very physical with me, pretty much basically pushing me out of the way because of we have the thing called the grand entrance in which we're honoring the family that are hosting the bar mitzvah. And because they need to be in front of the camera, if I'm in front of the camera, then that takes the attention away from them. So he pushes me out the way. Is like, excuse me for my profanity, but get the fuck out of the way. Like, get your ass out the way type of thing. So, like I said, apologies for my profanity. But that's not okay. That's not okay at all. And that's not something that anybody really should be going through. At the end of it, I try to approach him about it. And I'm like, long story short, he pretty much says, I don't really care about being on the same page. I care about being on my page. So, biggest question, how do you deal with someone like that? The only thing that I have done so far, I have taken up with upper management to let them know what has happened and what's been going on. And I've also asked the person who schedules me to put me to work with another MC. That's the only thing I can do. But like I said, he's the one that gets the most, in the most expensive, pretty much most paid bar mitzvahs. Like I can't really do anything about that. And I know that he really does want me to work with him. He definitely has a lot of carrot and stick strategy. He says, "Oh, you have great potential. You have such greatness in you." But then he does the things that he does, which demoralizes and discourages and minimizes not only my efforts, but me as a person, as a human being. So, yeah, I got um any strategies, any plans, anything to analyze when it comes to dealing with this, then I would greatly appreciate it. And thank you for giving me the mic. Thank you for letting me speaking.
Yeah, Man, I mean, you're doing the right thing. You need to distance yourself from this person because we have to understand you've sort of seen the pattern. And now at some point, it's like you already kind of can imagine and know that he's probably not going to change. And so I do think it's a really good idea that you're speaking to upper management and that there is somebody above him to talk to. And I think it would be much better to, even if it would be a little bit of a shift for you as far as like, I don't know if you get a percentage of what's money's being brought in from the bar mitzvahs or what, but it seems like for your sanity, for your mental health, it seems like a truly toxic, abusive situation. And this thing we were talking about earlier, where we would stay too long, or maybe just like, um, keep falling for that carrot and stick, keep falling for this sort of when they pull us in, and then every time it's like, oh, again, this happened again. At some point we need to take accountability for our own self and what we're allowing ourselves to experience. And I know we have a lot of ingrained ways of coping with that sort of behavior, and maybe that's partly why we end up in situations like this over again. We have to kind of go inside and try to help the part of us that would remain attracted and attached to that energy and start to seek within and be able to nurture our own self, because otherwise we're abandoning ourselves by allowing ourselves to be treated that way. It's like our inner child is getting rewounded again and again, and at some point we have to be the grown up and show up for the inner child instead of falling for people that would say, hey, I'm going to rescue you, and they don't actually have our best interests in mind. That's an ongoing set of lessons. It's really, really challenging. And, I'm a therapist. I believe in therapy. I recommend therapy. And one of the things that I think helps is a trauma-informed therapy. And especially the lens that I use a lot is parts work. So understanding that there's a part of me that sees this is wrong, and then there's a part of me that insists on me somehow tolerating it, and beginning to understand we have a choice. So sorry you're going through that, and what a jerk. Um, um, this is the classic presentation of a narcissist. I think what you're describing would be like the grandiosity and the I know I'm a narcissist, and kind of like oh yeah, so that's a classic presentation. And I think sometimes there's covert narcissists or victim narcissists that aren't like leading with all that success. And it's really sad because capitalism kind of promotes the grandiosity, and that's kind of what we're seeing at the top levels of our country, like people who are um the sociopaths sort of rise to the top in these weird hierarchies that we've got to get rid of, and now it looks like the house of cards is collapsing and we need to find other ways, right? Hopefully. And then, we need to just find other ways to rebuild a community that doesn't involve being one-upping everybody else, high-siding and putting other ones down, and that whole pattern of primitive idealization and devaluation, like they put you on a pedestal so they can knock you off, sort of thing. And one way we can change that is by noticing how we relate to it and changing that.
Yeah. And just another, I want to add on to that. That was beautiful. That was a beautiful answer. Yeah. Parts work for the win. And Calvin, I'm so glad you're here. I'm not sure, and feel free to look into this in your own time at your own pace. But again, in the MindQuest tab, there's a 21-day course called Dream Streams, and it helps you to get clear on like what lights you up so that you can start thinking about ways to make your own income. I'm really passionate about this, and I want to take some time. Maybe we'll have another event in the coming days where anyone who's interested, we can just brainstorm together. We'll do a bliss list is what I call it. And it's where you write down all the things that you're passionate about. And then you figure out what you can mash together to make a business out of it. I say this because you have a lot of charisma. You're doing a cool ass job, which tells me that you're pretty clear on some of your interests. And I bet you could do your own thing. And it might just be about like identifying what that niche is for you. And then also doing some of the inner work, like to ensure your nervous system that it's safe to do your own thing. And like that's something else we can work on here too. So yeah, I'll make an event, a bliss list party for all who want to do that, and we'll talk about it. I mean, yeah. Oh,
I
and
would love that. Oh, sorry.
excellent.
I
Sorry.
would love that. And I just wanted to let y'all know is like you guys are absolutely incredible. You guys are amazing at this, and I love the support that y'all have been given pretty much all neurodivergence, and especially even me. Thank you so much for welcoming me. Um, and just wanted to let y'all know, like, I definitely do have a lot of different kinds of interests and niche. Like today, I literally just released my first ever song featuring, like I'm featured on the song on Apple Music. It's called Doing My Thing with a little sis of mine. I'm from the DMV. Her name is Real and Explicit, and my brand name is Apollo Heat. I'm a dancer and I'm a gamer. And yeah, there's just a lot of things that we can go into. So I'm definitely down for the Bliss list.
Excellent. Okay. Viola, I see your hand up. So I will be asking you in 1 second. But Calvin, if you haven't done it already, can you put your socials in the chat box so we can all follow you and support? And also a link to your
Thank you.
phone.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Viola, feel free to unmute your mic or write in the chat box, whichever you feel more comfortable with.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to respond to Calvin also. Like first of all, thank you for sharing your story and the example. And because you remind me so much of my friend who's like also a dancer and he's super ambitious and talented and I admire him so much. So like that recognition is connecting you guys too. And now I feel like I know you because of that. But I wanted to say that as you were talking about the narcissist that you're dealing with, like his behavior kept ringing in my head and reminding me of like, oh, Gordon Ramsay, right? Because sometimes these people are like awful in a way, but it also makes them brilliant in some other ways, and it helps them succeed in this world, right? Like for some of these people, it really works well for them, especially under this like system. And so one thing that helped me or in like dealing with narcissists in my life, the ones that were like very successful and powerful, was recognizing that like in part like you want to change them, right? Like you feel like, oh, the way they're acting is really not cool and it harms me and them probably too, and you feel almost like not just to protect yourself, but in a way you want to help them, right? But I'm realizing it works for them, so maybe like that perspective can help you see that it's more about the decision of like how you want to relate to them, that they might never change because they're getting benefit out of being who they are and it helps them be successful in their own way, but we choose like how we relate to them or like in which space we are, whether we want to be under them and be treated the way we are treated, or whether we want to go into spaces that we feel safer. So yeah, if that's making sense, I like that's just something that helps me, that perspective.
That does make sense, Viola. The Gordon Ramsay analogy is for real, and that's kind of like how our culture currently, the one we need to deconstruct, promotes toxicity because it's supposedly good TV, the drama, the whole flipping the table type of thing has become elevated. And yeah, it's problematic. But yeah, figuring out how to find the right distance and closeness with people is learning what our needs are and how to have them met, and learning how to keep ourselves safe, nervous system, learning how to regulate. That's going to be the name of the game, I think, for a lot of us. Mm-hmm.
There's a question in the chat box from G. Can narcissists be normal people around the majority of people and just target certain individuals in secret?
Yes. Oh my gosh. So true. So can they be normal people around the majority of people? Yes, I think part of that grandiosity is one of the things that a narcissist is going to crave is being the best and being very brilliant. And that can help people succeed in business and settings like that, where everyone else, the outward facing looks so shiny. And, when they turn their attention on you, it can feel really great. But unfortunately, yeah, a lot of times there's a dark side under the mask, right? And so a lot of times if you were to, so we talked about the grandiose presentation, which is sort of like that, like, I'm a narcissist, I don't care who knows it, I can be a dick because I'm successful, fine. But then there's this idea of the covert narcissist. A covert narcissist is somebody that is going to be a little bit more they value being seen as really kind and really nice and very successful in that way. So you would have people who are maybe attracted to professions like teaching or psychology or reverends, things like that, where people are like, they want to project this beautiful, glowing persona, but then behind the scenes, they might have a scapegoat that they're taking things out on. And a lot of times, I think for us, we can be that. I guess to the question of the entire talk is like, why do we attract them? I feel like sometimes we can present ourselves as an easy target because we maybe don't understand that we need boundaries with them. Maybe we're scared of saying no to somebody because we see how they act when you say no, and then they can ensnare us and keep us, with the carrot and stick cycle that we were talking about earlier. So absolutely 100% narcissists can appear very normal, very nice, very wonderful to the outside world, and then be very abusive in covert ways to, behind the scenes. It's very common, actually, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Yeah, I experienced that myself. I think it's the most heartbreaking thing because I dated somebody who had a lot of narcissists. Either they were a narcissist or well, I don't know their diagnosis. So they had a lot of narcissistic qualities, but they came off to everyone else in my life like so wonderfully. And so unfortunately, when I finally separated from them, it required me to separate from a lot of other people too, because they supported them and not me in, what they were doing. So it can be very heartbreaking, but I mean, that was about 3 years ago. And in retrospect, having gone through it, I'm pretty grateful because it led me to find people who are better at seeing or who are better at like introspective and exploring the truth of things like I am. It just led me to deeper relationships. So I guess in the end it's all right, even though it sucks.
Yeah, there's a silver lining in everything. And
Yeah.
Narcissistic experiences can be good teachers.
Yes,
right?
That's exactly it. Yeah, because those people who I've distanced myself from, they never were that skilled at seeing me anyway. I often felt alone in the presence of these friends. So it led me to really get serious about what do I need in connection to feel safe and seen, and to start looking for that. Even it was hard. It still is hard, but
Yeah, it sounds like you had the whole smear campaign treatment.
Yes.
So that person could see that the relationship was maybe starting to fail, and they wanted to get ahead of that because you saw under their mask and they don't want that. So they're going to start talking about you in ways that would make people question your integrity or, just disparaging. So, and then, love bombing them so that whenever you have to leave that relationship, they can be like, oh yeah, I just discarded them because all the things that I shared with you. And it's so, red flags in the interest of how to not spend time with a lot of narcissists. If you're dating someone and they say my ex is crazy, listen, because that's like, yeah, that could be you next, that you might get made crazy, or all my exes are crazy. Like, pay attention to stuff like that. Part of patterns.
Yeah. I wanted to ask another question because I see Swad in the chat says that parents are so good at that one where they like direct their narcissistic traits at you, but nobody else sees it. And that
Mhm.
brings me to another side question. And then after that, I also want to circle all the way back to make sure we answer Dung V's question from the beginning. But my question is, I know that I have been reading that sometimes when people are still masking and they're undiagnosed autistic, that can appear like narcissism. So what, I guess I have
Mhm.
this is a two-part question. One, how do you spot the difference, if there is a difference? And two, what do we do about this? Like,
Mhm.
what's to be done?
Oh my goodness. Okay, this is such a good one. And it's right now a little bit of a hyper fixation for me because I'm super building a theory around it. It's like, okay, so we've got the neuro and the psych. The neuro is like our operating system, right? Like, so let's say we feel different because we're um, running Linux software in a Windows environment, for example, right? So that's the neuro. And then the psych is the defenses for how you cope with what you go through. And it's intertwined with the neuro part, but the psych part is like, how do we cope? What are our strategies? What are our defenses? What's our way of being in the world? And so, one thing I will say is that at the very root of a toxically narcissistic personality structure, which is the psych side, and we all have both, right? Is envy. It's pathological envy. And they will do almost anything to try and not be seen because deep, deep down, they hate themselves. So sometimes when they see authenticity, they really hate that because there's a part of them internally saying, how come she gets to be weird and everyone likes her and I don't get to be weird and etc. So what happens with that is internalized ableism can show up that way. If we have families and we that are also neurodivergent because it is genetic, sometimes people they're undiagnosed and they're not understanding what it is and they're trying really, really hard not to get caught as being defective or, R word or whatever. They might have a very big bunch of defenses around that. And sometimes those defenses are narcissistic defenses. So it's like, you think that you have ADHD, and I don't think so. First of all, because it makes me feel like inadequate, since deep down I know it's genetic, and B, you're gonna get us all found out that we're not normal, or all those things. Like a lot of times, unhealed trauma from being neurodivergent can lead to a narcissistic defenses, and so that's a really tough one. A lot of times it kind of comes back to that question that we pointed out before about like, um, let's see, I just got distracted. Where was I? Oh, why do we give them so much grace, a narcissistic person, right? And it's kind of like, I joke and I call them the Beauty and the Beast programming. Because it's a trauma thing, and I think that it's the whole question of whether neurodivergent people experience trauma is sort of a chicken and egg question, right? So being different is a little bit traumatizing. And one trauma response would be to fawn, which is to like try to take care of somebody, kind of walk on eggshells and help them be their best. And that's some of the ways that we can strategize growing up. Sometimes we get parentified where we're the parent of our parents, and this, whether they're neurodivergent or not, it can set up patterns where we are self-abandoning in order to try to create some kind of safety or survival for ourselves. And so, yeah, unfortunately, um, basically, yeah, it can be these patterns can be unconscious and ingrained, so that like, why do I keep having bosses like Gordon Ramsay, sort of a thing? And it might be because there's a sense of familiarity deep down within us that would have us attracted to that in a way. And then also, if we had a parent who was like alcoholic, for example, a little kid isn't going to be like, oh, that's terrible, it's on him, he really needs to stop. It would be like, if I could be better, if I'm good, that might rescue him or it might change him. And this is sort of a common young person belief that we can have develop. Um, just the same way narcissistic tendencies are defenses, we also can have different, sort of like the opposite ones, and they're almost always rooted in arrested development, which is not a term that gets used a lot anymore, but it's sort of like inner children that are healed or not healed. And we can't heal someone else's inner child, but we can maybe heal ours so that at the very least we're not being targeted by bullies.
Sorry, I'm saying yeah, and my mic is muted. Yeah, that's fantastic. I wanted to. I didn't. I look. I'm very autistic in this, but like I didn't want to miss these questions. So do you mind if I go back and ask it? Okay, and then
Not at all. And I see Amber, yes, that was just what I was saying. You wrote it out in a comment and I love it. Thank you.
And then so Dungvi asks, why do we see narcissists as angels and innocent and have huge understanding for them regarding their hard life background? And do you mind if I give my anecdotal answer to this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, nope, I don't mind.
So I think that I especially used to date people who, had kind of like tough backgrounds. And I think that I did that intentionally because I always felt very different. And I felt like there was something wrong with me. And that if I dated someone else who had a hard life and background, that they would be understanding of it. I felt like I was in good company, in other words. And that is partially because I am autistic, but it's also partially because I just have a traumatic background and I was holding a lot of shame. So for me personally, the solution to not doing this was understanding that like I have nothing to be ashamed of and to start to work through some of that shame with regulating, meeting all of my parts, my inner children, and spending some time with them, which I do all the time. Like I totally recommend it. Right now, I'm going to give everybody homework to just ask 8-year-old you, what is something that you would like? Like, do you want to blow bubbles? Do you want to turn in circles, go to the mall and pick out a toy? Do something for 8-year-old you. Like those parts of you need your connection. And those were the parts of me that experienced trauma. And there was nothing, there were children. So the fact that I look back on it with shame means I was like ashamed of little me. And I had to address that and heal those relationships. And that helped me to stop seeing other people as angels and innocent, because basically I was projecting my own past onto them when maybe they actually have always been assholes. I wasn't an asshole. I was a kid who, well, maybe not. I don't know. I feel bad saying that, but I should not project my shame onto other people because my story is my own. And sometimes it gives too many people grace who don't really deserve it and who aren't doing the work to heal like I've been trying to do. So that's my anecdotal answer.
I love that answer. Um, I think there's, we talk about projection, and projection is one of the things that narcissistic is can be a narcissistic defense. It's like, I'm not the bad guy, you are. And everyone does that, right? We'll all project what we see in others that we don't like is something that's really good to explore because it tells us about ourselves, things we don't like in ourselves. But there's another kind, there's a flip side of projection, the negative kind. We can project so that would be that'd be projecting your shadow, right, onto other people. And there's this golden shadow that we have where we can project our beautiful qualities onto someone else. And we're looking at them through a lens of, I'm looking for good things and I'm seeing them, and it's our own goodness reflected back at us. And that can be where, and that paired with sort of that neurodivergent kind of naivete or whatever, and constantly giving people more and more credit. And then just being maybe lonely and trying, or it's a familiar thing, right? Constantly like, falling for their bullshit over and over again. And so, yeah, that paired with the idea of like little kids have that sort of a form of grandiosity where it's like, if only I'm better, then that will make the people around me better. And this is just leads to a lot of self-abandonment and makes us ripe for the picking, people that are just trying to scoop narcissistic supply off of us.
So Dongvi is asking, so how do we stop? How do we stop?
Well, the first step is to start becoming aware. We're already good at pattern recognition. So what's hard to do is to notice our own patterns. And that's where starting to notice when we're doing it, right? So for example, okay, that happened again. It happened again here. How can we stop is the first question when we're like, first thing we need to be able to do is say, oh, I'm doing this again, and observe it and be like, what? Now that there's a part, now that I can see that part of me is falling into this trap, can I help that part make a different choice? So I like to use, again, like the 8-year-old me. Maybe 8-year-old me is being tricked again. So that's probably a big part of it. It's just a matter of giving yourself the grace and the space, validate the part that falls for it, and say thank you for trying to keep me safe. And it's a new day now. Like I am the grown up in this family that's inside of me, so I'm gonna take better care of you and reparent the part of us that would always be looking for external validation and keep getting tricked. And then that when we can develop that communication with our inner child, with our younger self, yeah, they can communicate to us like, what would we like to do instead of going towards somebody who's mean? And then maybe nurturing those things, even if it's age regressed, if it's part, if it's been part of your masking that you think it would be inappropriate for an adult to blow bubbles, that's crazy. Go ahead, like, please have fun and let people think you're weird, because part of how they can, part of how people control us is by trying to make us addicted to their approval. And we have to find our own approval and, each other's, which is kind of nice about here.
That is a word that people try to get you addicted to their approval is so serious. Yeah. Thank you for all that you've shared. I want to start to wrap it up because I don't want to keep you for a trillion years, but I do have one other question for you. Maybe a kind of a dual question. Hey, Glenda. Shoot, Glenda.
Hi, friends.
Hi. This made me lose my train. Hold on. Let me get the train back in the station. Right. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the fact that so many of us have experienced narcissistic relationships or just abusive or otherwise unhealthy patterns. And now we really want healthy connection, but it can feel very scary to be open to it. And in some ways, maybe we don't even have the tools to like go deep in healthy connection. So my dual question would be, what is your advice for helping for someone who wants to open their heart to healthy connection? And then secondly, can you talk a little bit about we just started a conflict resolution chat room here in this 24/7 Zoom. So that way, when you are here in the Zoom, if you have like a conflict with someone in the Zoom, that doesn't necessarily mean that anyone's bad. I mean, there's going to be conflict even in healthy situations. So can you just talk about how people might go about working through that in the conflict resolution Zoom room?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it brings me back to that resource. It's kind of like a journal page or a worksheet. And I almost feel like if we could post a bulletin board inside of these rooms, be like, here's this resource that might help you guys work through the conflict. And part of it is just figuring out how to sit with what happened and learning how to verbalize it. And for me, that usually helps to write it out, either that or, be with a mediator that can help reflect, help me find my words about what it is that's going on. And so this conflict resolution tool basically goes like this. It's like, when something happened that was not okay with me, I would be able to find the words first for myself and then maybe be able to say them to the person. But it's when blank happened, I felt blank. And you want to put the the situation in, fill in the blank, and then the second blank, I felt. It should be a simple word like mad, scared, sad, afraid, right? Pretty much all the emotions can narrow down to that. So then step 2 in this idea is you're going to own what happened for you in that situation. You say the story that started playing in my head around it is whatever that might be. It might be that, um, everybody hates me. I don't know. Who knows what it is, right? And then step three would be, what it reminded me of is, and this is something we can choose to share with people or we can keep it to ourselves, but it's really important for us to be able to understand what it reminded me of, because if I got triggered, that means there's something in my past that possibly was showing up here that maybe is not present day. And so the parts of us that have been traumatized, a lot of times they don't have the words and they don't have the ability to understand then from now. So what we want to do is be able to say what it reminded us of, and we might be able to go really deep and be like, it reminded me of the time when I was 8 and my parents forgot to pick me up after basketball practice. Something like that. That would be very, personal and relatable. And then step 4 is whether you skip step 3 or not, to tell that person when you get to step 4 is what I would like instead is blank. So basically, it's just a formula for getting clear on what it was that bothered you about a situation, what was the conflict, and then learning how to verbalize it, at least first for yourself, and then possibly gently for the other person to hear. And when we can be that clear, and when the person is really going to be able to listen reflectively, like to reflect back what I hear you say is, then it becomes like kind, it's clear. So when we can be clear about things, that's much kinder. And we don't have to be nice, but we do want to try to be kind. And sometimes resolving conflicts involves being clear with each other and being open to hearing the other person's perspective and taking turns, so that if somebody else has a whole different story that played, we're going to each try to understand each other's story. And that can take some time. So maybe what it would be is like if we go in the conflict resolution room and we're having a conflict, maybe we can say, okay, um, let's both do this. We'll go our separate ways for now, and then we're going to have a meeting after we've pondered this, a little bit and maybe followed some of the steps. And then it's also really important to understand that just because someone doesn't agree with us doesn't mean that they're our enemy. And it's really easy to get into that idea that, like, no, I'm quitting community because it's not possible since everyone's not exactly like me. Well, we can't have community if we're trying to make everyone exactly like us. Okay, I hope that answered the question.
Oh, that totally answers the question. But you and I had talked a little bit about you coming on sometimes to do conflict resolution or help people through it. We haven't totally worked that out yet, but are you still, well, this is a weird time to ask you. We're more on that later. Be on the lookout in the living room chat room for an update, because we had mentioned this, but it hadn't worked out the deets.
Yeah, that's right. We've got a whole bunch of really neat things in the works, but
Yeah.
that's one of them. I'm happy to come in, periodically, and we'll maybe even make a schedule where I'll be in that room. And if anyone's having a conflict, we can, I'll mediate.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. This community is really important, and it's really, really important that if we have tendencies where we might be, our wounds would have us making people feel bad or being experienced as a bully, we need to own that and heal it. And the same thing, we also need to stop self-abandoning. We need to speak up when we feel like things weren't okay, but we also need to do that in a gentle way that's not like bridge burning. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for this talk. This has been lovely. I'm just going to take a quick peruse and make sure I didn't skip over anyone. And if anyone has any final thoughts, raise your hand and we'll unmute you. But because we want to wrap up at like 6:30, so if you could keep it to about 3 minutes, that way we can get everybody in. Okay, Calvin, go ahead and unmute, and I'm going to mute to give you the floor.
So, just as Catherine said, as far as the conflict resolution, I think that that's really great. I was literally, as I was kind of going out in my head, she was basically saying everything that I wanted to. But as far as the second part, after the feelings are, this made me feel this way, like these particular adjectives, and it's like mad, sad, da 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 da. And then this is what happened in my head when I go over the situation. This is what happened in their head. This is when they're going over the situation. I feel like there should be like an intention part there. It's like what I meant when I said this, what I meant when I did this. I did not mean to make them feel that way. I feel like that also should be part of it, because then the worst thing that is to happen is we feel compelled, right, to feel like apologetic without letting people know um what our intentions were, even though they didn't come across, the right way that we wanted them to. So I feel like there definitely should be an intention part before getting into the backstory. But other than that, everything sounded great. And thank you so much, Catherine.
Yeah, of course. And I'm typing in those 4 steps into the chat. It's a little bit sketchy here, but you'll get the picture. And there's also a PDF floating around.
Yeah, there's the conflict resolution steps. When you're logging into the Zoom, you'll see it as a module right below like all the Zoom details, so that you can see the protocol if you want to see all the parts in it. And I see too what you mean about intention. SWOD, clearing up how to get our intention is great, especially when there's an established relationship. Totally. So I've actually done this process with Dr. Catherine, worked through a conflict, and not with Dr. Catherine, but just you mediated for us. And I think what happened is each person was given the floor, so just the full floor. And then when the other person had the floor, they were able to state their intention. But a big part of the mediation is just about like being able to speak your piece and have the floor to do that. And to try to understand that like both of you have different perspectives of what happened. And that's important. You can really start to see it. Your story is not their story about the same situation. So,
right. And that's how we can learn about each other. Like, oh, your intention was that, and I took it this way, and we're both right. We just need to learn how to work together. And, hopefully when that open communication can happen, even during difficult conversations, then that's how we build the trust to be able to be really clear and really honest with each other versus, try to be like, no, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And then when we do that and we didn't mean it, resentment builds up. And that's when that'll start coming out sideways, a little passive aggressive or whatever. We can't have that. That's not safe emotionally for people.
That's so true. And I found that at the base of every disagreement, for the most part, with well-meaning people, at the base of every disagreement, there's an unmet need. And so if you can work through this conflict and try to figure out what each other's need is, and if you're able to meet it for each other, it can help you a lot in getting deeper in the connection,
And you're doing somebody a big favor when you're letting them know what your needs are, because then they get a chance to make you happy. If we think it's not safe to have any needs and we're just like, oh no, never mind, then maybe we're the one that's not so safe, because we can't let people know what we want and we can never get our needs met.
Oof, a word. Wow, yeah. Thank you. Okay, it looks like another question here. Sorry, keep us in community sounds like cage. Or what does keeping mean? Oh, okay. I think this is just about Glenda's comment. Okay, well, that's it for me. Does anyone else have any last statements or thoughts? No, we're all good. Okay. Well,
I appreciate all the comments and everything in the chat. It's really good. You guys are it feels so good to know you guys know some of this already, and we can all help each other.
For sure. And just so you know, next week we're doing a Zoom hangout just so that people can get to know each other. We can do whatever y'all want, listen to music, answer questions, dance in our living rooms or wherever you are. And then the week after that, I'm going to introduce you to Olivia Bolt, who is our new breathwork practitioner. And if you're looking for a way to learn to regulate your nervous system, I think breath work is like fabulous. It helps you to drop into your body in a way that totally separates the work from your mind. Sometimes my mind gets in the way with certain practices, but not with this one. And it's very healing. So, well, I hope we'll see you for that one too.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I will go ahead and
Thank you.
stop the recording. Hold on one second.